Welcome back, chess friends. Today, we're going to see one of the finest games that's ever been played. And I think, in at least the first half of the 20th century, this was probably regarded as the greatest game ever. It felt like Alekhine was doing things no other player was doing. I mentioned in a previous video that he had this grand style, almost couldn't be replicated. Let's enjoy this one, and I think a lot of players by the end will recognize this if you've been a chess player for quite a while. If you're new to chess, buckle up. This will be one of the most amazing games you've ever seen. Okay. Fortunately for us, I will do some commentary, but I'm going to leave it to the professionals here. I have some great notes from Alekhine himself, playing with the black pieces, as well as Kasparov, who annotated this game. And Alekhine noted about the Dutch defense on move 1, answering f5 to white's d4. He said, a daring defense that I only use in exceptional cases. In this game, in order to have a chance of winning first place, I had to play for a win, and while my opponent would have had to draw to get third place. Okay, g3 is still today a common way to handle this. Bishop to b4 check. Bishop takes bishop. Knight takes bishop. And knight c6. An interesting move. Usually you'll see some d5, c6 setups, but knight c6 directly threatens the pawn, kind of forces white to defend it. And white defends it with the natural knight g to f3. Black castles, white castles. Okay, 8 moves in. Both players reasonably well developed. Both players castled. Good pawn structure in the center. Just a very natural, equal game. Queen b3. King h8, just sidestepping any danger along the diagonal. Useful move, probably indicating he wants to push this pawn at some point. Queen c3. And there is e5. e3. And notice you really can't take this one, at least not here, because at the end of this line, takes, the queen will be able to capture the knight. So not just a free pawn at all. This move also aims at freeing the bishop on c8, e3, a5, b3, queen e8. This move is good, but he'll later play queen e8, and it will be really one of the best moves of the game. a3, queen h5, you can feel some beginnings to some attack. Perhaps this bishop can join in with the move after, say, f4. But actually this game gets very locked down. h4, and really looks like it's not going to be too exciting of a game. f3 gets a question mark, but really you're just forcing black to play back a good move, and white is still saddled with these weak pawns. f4, e4. That move really locks in the bishop, which is going to suffer this game. The white pieces really suffer due to this e-pawn. Notice you can't come back here or here. This bishop really just has a miserable time in this game. Rook d1. Notice all 8 pawns are still on the board. I'll remind everyone of an old chess saying. Perhaps Tarash said it. He had a lot of sayings. I don't remember who, but if you have one bad piece, you have a bad position. Whoa, that's profound, right? But when you really think about it, when you have just a terrible piece, it's as if you're playing with one hand tied behind your back. You're essentially down a piece if things don't open up eventually. So keep that in mind. Knight f1, and you start to see this what could be considered a nice safe king, but at some point in chess we have to do something active. So a4, knight back to c6, and that really is obviously looking to get to the b4 and eventually the d3 square. So that wasn't an option a moment ago with the pawn on a3, but now that it's gone, hey, let's jump back. Ingen prefers black slightly here. Let's say -1. Knight b4, a nice outpost. bishop h1. And here's a quote from Alekhine about this move. The fact that white has to resort to such incredible maneuvers in order to somehow fortify his kingside best proves the difficulty of his position. And queen e8. About this move, Alekhine says, a very strong move that brings new advantages to black, either the possession of the d5 square to c takes d5, or the opening of the queen side through b6 and c5, or finally, a pawn gain as in the game. So maybe a little translation problem there. This I translated from the German. It was in ChessBase. Rook g2. This is an ugly situation for the white pieces. Your pieces need to be active. This bishop here is kind of just getting suffocated by his own teammates. D takes c4, and bishop takes a. That's what Alekhine was talking about when he played queen e8. He said, as in the game, we're going to win this free pawn. White is doing really gymnastics over here with the pieces around the king, but just has nothing to do. It's so painful. b5, knight d3, finally using that great outpost. That's the best piece on the board. And here, if you've really studied chess many years or are a stronger player, you're probably starting to recognize this game. Oftentimes we see these beautiful combinations, but maybe not the position leading up to them. b4. Rook takes a8. And here, a magical moment in chess history. I think every player would calculate this, but he really must have seen this a few moves ago. Here, Alekhine played b takes c3. Rook takes our queen back. And instead, here, our rook completely hanging. Instead of taking back, he plays c2. And into chess history he goes. Remember, this was 1922. Alekhine does not become champion until 1927. World champion is Capablanca right now. So this is just one of those wow type moments where this guy could be the world champion. Of course, we know now he does become. But this is just absolutely brilliant. Giving up the rook. At king h7. And here we have to read a little bit of the notes from Kasparov. So who better to comment? The white rook from a1 can be proud of itself. It has taken black's queen and both rooks. Alas, a single modest pawn from b7 has nullified these achievements. Remember, we got all the way here and like this. Kasparov goes on. For decades, chess fans have enjoyed this mind-boggling position, and I like this quote. He says, mind-boggling position of spiritual domination. So that really had me laughing when I heard it, spiritual domination. Essentially, you cannot prevent a queen from coming here. The white piece is still all jumbled up. Alekhine writes about knight f2, forced, and c1, queen. Knight f1. Again, these pieces, although they pretend to defend their king, really the king is not so safe. Notice the next move. Knight e1. Not hitting the rook. Alekhine says the threat is no more and no less than knight f3. Checkmate. Stunning. So rook h2. Queen takes c4. The attack does not stop. Rook b8. Bishop to b5, threatening checkmate. And the rook again has to give itself. So let's pause for a minute. Technically here, white is not down too much. They have a rook and a bishop for a queen, but it's the worst rook and bishop combination that you've ever seen. Just never going to create any threats or counterplay. g4, yikes. For a second, a glimpse of hope for the doomed bishop on h1. That's what Alekhine said. But knight f3, and there it goes. This pawn now participates in the attack. One less defender around the king. Ugly pawns to boot. Queen e2, and Alekhine writes, Zugzwang. The white pieces cannot move. The game went d5, and we just start kind of taking these free pawns. I want to point out one nice variation. Knight h3. You think, okay, at least we hit their queen, we move the knight, maybe something. But there's a stupendous move, knight g4. Look at that one. And the irony of another pawn threatening a knight and about to promote. That's the second time we've seen that same exact tactic. A new black queen will appear. There's also a move like rook h3, the same knight g4. Notice checkmate is threatened if the knight takes knight. So there's just nothing to do here. He plays d5, and Alekhine realizes white can make no moves. This is kind of an old-fashioned asserting your dominance, essentially, when you just move the king back and forth. Kind of saying, I have everything handcuffed for the moment, and soon you will run out of oxygen here. e4, and this is just white giving away pawns. Takes, and then d6 takes, f6 takes. Okay. Now we have 2 extra pawns in addition to the queen versus rook and knight. Queen e2. And Alekhine writes here, an elegant ending worthy of this game. Black forces a 1-pawn endgame. W-O-N, 1. We're threatening mate here. Rook takes. And again, for the second time in the game, third time total, we've seen the same tactic. Beautiful. King f2, the only way to prevent a queen from surviving. And here, a winning endgame extra pawn. And Alekhine converts it nicely here. d5. And this is where white resigned. Fantastic. So again, we could play a few more moves if you want to just put these on the board. Something here like king takes d5, king takes f4. And we don't even have to chase down the other pawn. I'm sure white is just lost. So fantastic game. I mean, this is one for the ages. But I do want to go back a little bit and look at some of the variations after this stunning sacrifice here. So rook takes a8. Actually, Alekhine Kasparov points out a nice variation. He said after queen takes a8, still the queen is hanging, queen b3, queen a1, invading, and rook a8. After this line, of course, black completely winning. Here, Kasparov writes rook a8 would have forced white's resignation in a few moves, but Alekhine was not satisfied with this prosaic demolition. He was after something immortal. Nice, huh? Poetic, eloquent. I love it. Really, that was a well-annotated game as well as one of the finest of all time. So really cool. Again, just the recap here of rook takes rook, pawn takes queen, rook takes queen, and then c2. Wow, remember the spiritual domination. So really cool. This is just one of the finest games that's ever been played. If you haven't seen this game prior to watching this video, you're welcome. Play through it slowly. You'll learn so much. If you had seen this game, hopefully this was a fun reminder of how good these old players were. Really, really impressive stuff by Alekhine. I would say if you're really learning chess, he might be the #1 player to study. The attacks are so well grounded as well. You see here just winning a king and pawn endgame, and their ferocious attacking games. And again, nowadays, if you look at the top players, it's hard to understand. These games, the mistakes actually show up on the board. In today's modern chess, the mistakes actually show up just in the analysis. So you want to see the mistakes, you want to see the lessons learned,